I want to talk to you about things that you should do before you actually start designing. Things that are often very overlooked. Beginning graphic design, web design students think I'm just going to jump in. Sometimes they go right to programming. Other times they'll jump right into Photoshop and start designing the layout of the site. And typically, if you do that, you just end up copying other things that are out there. There's a good old adage that says that form follows function. Form meaning the physical form that your design takes on. So you first really have to truly understand what the function is of what you're designing. And a lot of times the rest of the design, the form, then takes care of itself. So one of the very first steps is before you interview a client, you should be prepared with a client questionnaire. You'll eventually develop your own, but if you even just Google the topic of client questionnaire, you'll find all kinds of stuff out there. And I found one here that was, this was put together by a person who does WordPress web design and development. And there's even a little video clip that you can watch here. So if you want to copy this URL, it's right up here. She even put it together in a Word document. So this would be a great place to start. Google, find a few more, and voila, you have one now in your back pocket for any time that you sit down with a client. And here's what this looked like, the actual document. So you can see there's quite a bit to it. Really detailed thinking, and then that way you know exactly what your client wants. The way here, I want to show you some of the stuff that I typically do, so please ignore my spelling and nasty drawings here. But if I'm going to meet with a client and it's either a new concept or a very important client, I'll start just jotting down ideas in physical format so that I'm prepared with the right the right questions for the client based on whatever product they are trying to sell or get across. In this case, it's a graphic designer's portfolio site, but I like to just start drawing things out because I'm a very visual person. And then either before or after I meet with the client, for sure, I'll start doing research. In this case, I did some research ahead of time, started looking at what type of sites were out there. You know, do I want the header on the top, the big area to show the portfolio here, or do I want to go with the nav system and the header on the side, so I have even a bigger area to show the portfolio work? And you know, then maybe this might work better to translate into mobile. So you should perform a lot of research before you decide on a concept for your design. And a concept is just the underlying idea for the design. It could be as simple of a concept as I'm designing a brochure for a bank, so the concept should be conservative, trustworthy looking design. Or it could be something that is super clever that would win you a design contest when people look at the image that they get from your overall design and then look at the text that goes along with it. When they put both of them together, they're like, wow, that's the coolest idea. I wish I came up with that. If you should ever have trouble coming up with ideas for a project, whether it be a website or a poster, and you want it to be unique, try some free thought techniques such as mind mapping, or such as a mind map would be the answer there. This is, to me, is one of the best things that I've ever started doing as a designer. When you do a mind map, you just start with your main topic in the center, and then you just, as soon as you come up with an idea that's related to that, you go over here and you write it down. Then maybe you came up with another idea related to it over here. And then all of a sudden your mind thought, oh, regarding what I just wrote here, I have this, this, and this that also go along with that. And then all of a sudden a new idea comes up and you write it down, maybe a couple things to go with it. Come back over here and say, oh, I just thought of this. So it's just freely random. Do not judge yourself as you're doing these. They don't need to look nearly as pretty as this one. Here's one that was done with mind mapping software, which there's even free websites out there for that. And it again, it's just like this says subject, and then an idea based on the subject, and then sub ideas. I like to start out with a big like 11 by 17 piece of paper so that you can just keep going and keep going. And if the mood strikes you, get out another piece and keep going. Don't worry that a lot of these things may not make sense or may even be borderline immature or childish. When you're done, then you sit back and maybe even after lunch or the next day, come back, look at this, and you may find some abstract thing over here that when coupled with something from over here is the greatest idea that's ever seen the light of day for the topic that you're working on. I always like to remind myself of 6 basic graphic design elements as I get started in a design. It can very much keep me on track. So the first one is the concept, which is really just the idea behind the project. So I'll walk you through how these work with this particular project of developing a client's portfolio site. The concept here is let the client's work shine through. So stay out of the way with the website. Sometimes the concepts are that simple. And then if I remind myself that the remaining 5 all need to point back to the concept. So the color, my color choices, in this case, it's don't conflict with the client's work. So it comes right back to here. Now, like I said, sometimes these are much more complex than this. Typography, again, let the client's work show. So keep it simple but nice, classic design. Image, the imagery in this is all about the client's work. So even though it's real popular today to have a website that comes up with one big image, would the client and I really want to do that? Because right away the people are coming to the site and they're going to ask, like, what is this image about? How does this relate to the client's work? Maybe we should just wait and show individual pieces of the client work. And then format, this would mean, like, is it a CD cover? If so, it's, X by X inches. Is it a poster? In this case, it's a website, but we want to keep mobile in mind, of course, as well as desktop, but it's getting, past the tipping point where more people are viewing websites mobile. Maybe not a portfolio site, because that'd probably take place in an interview, or at least a creative director sitting behind a desk looking through people's sites to see who they're going to call in for an interview. But nonetheless, this is definitely another question that you ask. And then grid or composition. So this deals with more how is the work laid out? What type of hierarchy are we using? How are we dividing things up? Are we actually drawing out a grid? A lot of times when you see a really well-designed book that page after page has some type of resemblance of order to it, there's usually a grid behind it where the actual designer has, in some form of another, most likely on a computer now, the skeleton of that grid, and they turn that on when they're working so that things line up very nicely. Good design is typically no accident. Sometimes a grid can just be as simple as just dragging out a guide and making sure that everything aligns along this edge, and then maybe an image goes in here. So they don't necessarily have to be complex to get the job done. Fairly common grid system for web designs is this grid area followed by a gutter, so that if you're putting type in here, well, this is not the best, well, here's a better example, goes right against here, but then if there were another block of text right next to it, like there is here, you have at least this much room between, and then this, and it can either take up a couple columns or several columns to get the idea done. And a lot of times people use a 12 6 and 4. They'll use 12 grids for the full site, 6 for tablets, and 4 for phones. Okay, so what are the 6 graphic design elements? That was back to here. So we have concept, color, typography, image, format, and then grid/composition. And then after you meet with the client and you know what the client wants via your questionnaire, then you may go back and start drawing out and basic general brainstorming again, um, breaking things down into categories and so on. And then essential is that before you actually design the web, you know what the skeleton of it looks like, or the wire diagram. So to help you organize your website, you should draw out a skeleton of the website, which is more commonly known as a wire diagram. So here's your box that represents your welcome page, and then from the welcome page you can get to the portfolio. From the portfolio, these arrows represent that you could go directly to the contact page or back to the welcome page, but you couldn't go from the portfolio page to the page that thanks you for sending a question, or you couldn't go from the contact page to a breakdown of the portfolio. So it all makes sense. You just try to keep from putting in any extra detail, and I just couldn't help myself here because I was thinking on the welcome page, you should introduce yourself and say, contact me. So rather than them have to go up and find a contact form in the navigation, you could just have the word contact in a different color, and it could also take them there. So now the website's probably taken shape in your mind. The next thing that you want to do is gather and organize all the assets for your website, such as images and text. Put all the images in one place here, and I go through and I can see, okay, these are the images I'm going to be using for the portfolio. So good, they're all there in one place. If I haven't edited them yet, I may not want to until I get an idea of how they're going to look in the website. So that's okay, because I can always just resize them temporarily when I'm doing my mock-ups in Photoshop. And I have my text organized here in a Word document. And the beauty of this is that I have some, basic spell checking done. And I went ahead and made a name label for each of the images, and then put descriptive type, because people want to know what your work is about, especially when you're trying to land a job early on. I put stuff in red that I wasn't sure if I would be able to handle depending on the design. If the work is in a slideshow, will I be able to click on the image? Probably more likely I'll have to click like in text, so I'm just kind of reminding myself of those things. And the thing that is so important on a website is get your text proofread. And as a student, you have resources to do just that. It's typically called a reading center or something like that, mostly developed for when you're taking writing classes, but this is no exception to that. Don't wait till the end of the semester when every student from an English class has their final paper due. Go in there, get that done early. It'll take them, seconds to go through with you your page where you're introducing yourself. But the last thing you want is someone forming a wrong first impression of you because you have horrible grammar on your welcome page, or even just not being as descriptive as you could or should be for your images. So have your text proofread, and for you guys that's going to be easy.